Just 2 items again this time, but it is still a pretty good lineup nonetheless. Let's get stuck in. On side A we have a playable demo of Ocean's Robocop, which was a huge hit back in the day. I often load the tape version of this game up just so that I can listen to Jonathan Dunn's amazing loading tune, which brilliantly is included in this demo version. I'm not actually very keen on the game itself though, because it is punishingly difficult. As you will have no doubt already noticed, I managed to die within seconds of starting on my first attempt. You only get one single life before it is game over, and your energy can drain before you know it. With a bit of practice, I did manage to get further into the stage, but I never managed to finish it. When I used to play this game with my friend back in the day, we always had an infinite lives poke turned on, thanks to the action replay cartridge he owned. And from memory, he also had save states at the beginning of each level saved to disk, so we could just skip to the bits we wanted to see, such as the photo fit puzzle and the shooting gallery style stage. This was the start of Ocean's multi-genre movie license games and led to things like Batman the Movie and The Untouchables, among many others. These games were incredibly lucrative for them, and most of the time they were decently made, with a few exceptions. Now let's take a look at what the Zzapped reviewers thought of the finished product. Gordo did mention the punishing difficulty, but added that it doesn't damage the playability, it just makes you want to beat the crap out of the baddies just that little bit more. He concluded by saying, "As the saying goes, I'd buy that for $1. I couldn't believe what I was reading when I saw what the other reviewer, Math, had to say. The sound, on the other hand, is pretty naff all the way through, repetitive tunes and weedy effects, and soon annoying. You what, mate, the music is absolutely amazing." They ended up awarding the game a score of 89%, summing up with an atmospheric interpretation of a great theme. That's a pretty fair score all in all, I think, but I do wish it was just a tad easier, especially for the very first stage, which can be quite off-putting to new players. Flipping over to side B now, we have a full game that was also published by Ocean and developed by Sensible Software by the name of Parallax. Now, before I start talking about the game, I want to take this opportunity to regale you with my little Sensible Software related story. Going back at least 5 years ago now, probably more, I used to read my copies of Retro Gamer magazine during my lunch break at my office, which is based in central London. One day I was reading a few articles like normal when this quite attractive young lady from sales, who I'd never really spoken to before except email, came up to me and said, "My dad is in that magazine." Now, I was in the middle of reading something, so I didn't quite acknowledge what she said at first and just said, "Oh really?" or something like that. Then she wandered off. It wasn't till a good 5 minutes or so later that I remembered her surname was Hare. Oh my god, her dad is John Hare. At that point in time, he was writing a regular column in Retro Gamer every month, which also happened to be one of my favourite parts of the mag. I was so embarrassed though that I couldn't bring myself to go and say sorry that I hadn't realised what she was talking about sooner. My intention was to bring it up the next time our paths crossed in the communal kitchen, but not long after this she left the company for pastures new. Anyway, let's get back on track and discuss Parallax, shall we? This is not a game that I was familiar with at all before making this video. When I first fired up the game to check it out for a few minutes without reading any instructions or watching anything about it, I didn't have a clue what I was doing. In the end, I found a very useful review that Hellfire64, aka Rob, who frequently writes for Reset magazine, made, which explained how to play the game. What at first glance looks like a fairly simple multi-directional shooter is in fact a lot deeper. What you're supposed to do is look for little buildings around the base, land your ship, load up with essential supplies such as oxygen, and then set out on foot. You have to find a scientist in one of the bases, steal their key card. If it starts from a number from 1 to 5, then use that key card to obtain one letter from the passcode needed to access the central computer. You can also withdraw some cash from an ATM, which lets you buy a bonanza pack with drugs. You then have to drug another scientist and escort them to the central computer so that they help you access the next zone. The colour of the background then changes and you start the whole process over again. I make it sound fairly straightforward here, but it is quite tricky because controlling your ship isn't the easiest thing in the world, with the landing gear being controlled via the spacebar on the keyboard. Then you have to be lucky enough not to only find the scientists as they are in random buildings, but also the keycards you need. Keycards starting with 0 are useless, and you don't need multiple copies of the same one either. You don't actually need all the letters in the passcode, you can potentially guess the last one or two. You can also skip directly to the central computer for any stages you've already completed before, because the passcodes don't change from one game to the next. Parallax is quite an interesting game, certainly ahead of its time. I shall have to practice some more so that I get better at it. Gary Penn said, Parallax is an unusual blend of 3 types of the finest genre. Julian Rignall added, everything has been nicely thought out, the scenery, the objective and the means by which you achieve it. They ended up awarding the game 93%, a Sizzler award, and then summed up with a neat mix between a shoot 'em up and an arcade adventure, with a few other things thrown in for good measure. It's definitely one of the most interesting games we've seen so far. So that brings us to the end of episode 5. There's going to be 13 episodes in total for this first block, and I will probably take at least a month off from doing these, maybe 2, before I come back re-energised with a new background picture and music. After that, there will be 2 further blocks of 12 episodes each. It's going to take a while to get there, but I hope you stick around for the journey. I'll see you again for episode 6 in 2 weeks' time, so in the meantime, take care.